Her hands would not stop shaking. Not because it was cold. Not because she was sick. But because the man sitting on her porch, the same man she had been feeding for 3 months, had just said 4 words that changed everything. 4 simple words. And those 4 words cracked her world wide open like an egg dropped on concrete. Clara pressed her back against the kitchen wall, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. The plate she had been holding slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a loud crash, shattering into 3 clean pieces. She didn't even look down. She couldn't. Her eyes were locked on him, on his face, on the way his lips had moved when he said those words, on the way his eyes, those tired, sad old eyes, had looked straight into hers like he had been waiting a long, long time to say them. The old man on the porch didn't move. He just sat there, very still, with the evening light falling soft and orange across his face. His gray beard, his worn-out coat, his cracked shoes wrapped in duct tape at the toes. And he said it again, quietly, gently, like he wasn't even afraid anymore. Clara's mouth fell open, but no words came out. Her daughter, 8-year-old Maya, came running into the kitchen from the living room. "Mommy? I heard something break. Mommy? Why are you crying?" Clara hadn't even realized she was crying. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and forced a smile down at her daughter. "I'm okay, baby. Go back inside. Go back inside right now." Maya looked at her mother's face. Then she looked through the screen door at the old man on the porch. Then she looked back at her mother. And even an 8-year-old could tell something was very, very wrong. But what? What had the old man said? What 4 words could make a grown woman shake like that? To answer that, we have to go back. All the way back to where this story really began. 3 months ago, on a Tuesday morning when Clara had absolutely nothing left to give. And gave anyway. Clara Ann Mitchell was 34 years old, and she was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She lived in a small yellow house on Bender Street, in a neighborhood that used to be nice but had slowly gotten quiet and forgotten, the kind of street where half the houses had for sale signs that had been sitting in the yard so long the paint was peeling off them. She had 1 daughter, Maya, and no husband. Not anymore. Her husband, Derek, had left 2 years ago. He didn't leave angry. He didn't slam doors or say terrible things. He just left, packed a bag one Sunday afternoon, kissed Maya on the forehead, told Clara he was sorry, and walked out to a car that Clara later found out belonged to someone else. Someone new. Someone who didn't have a sick mother to take care of or a stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter. Clara didn't cry for a long time after that. She was too busy, too focused on surviving. She worked at a laundromat called Sunshine Clean 6 days a week. She folded other people's clothes. She fixed broken machines with a screwdriver she kept in her apron pocket. She smiled at customers even when her feet ached and her back hurt, and she hadn't eaten anything since the granola bar she had at 6 in the morning. The pay was not great. Actually, let's be honest, the pay was bad. But it was enough. Barely enough. Enough to keep the lights on, enough to buy groceries, enough to make sure Maya had lunch money and a clean uniform every morning. Some weeks it wasn't even enough for that. On those weeks, Clara got creative. She made soup out of whatever was left in the cabinet. She told Maya they were playing a game called Picnic Dinner, when all she could put on the table was crackers, peanut butter, and orange slices. She laughed and made it fun because that's what mothers do. But at night, when Maya was asleep, Clara would sit at the kitchen table with the bills spread out in front of her like a puzzle she couldn't solve. And she would let herself feel it. The weight of it. The loneliness. The fear. She wasn't asking for much. She just wanted things to be okay. It was on a Tuesday morning in early October when she first saw him. She was leaving for work at 7:15, locking the front door with Maya already at school, when she noticed something on the sidewalk just past her small front yard. A man. He was sitting on the ground with his back against the old oak tree that grew near the edge of her property. He was old, maybe 65, maybe older, it was hard to tell. His clothes were dirty but not torn. He had a gray beard that was long and uneven, and a dark green coat that had seen much better days. At his feet was a small canvas bag, the kind you get for free at the grocery store, and it looked almost empty. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, eyes open, staring at nothing. Clara slowed down as she passed. "Excuse me," she said carefully. "Sir? Are you okay?" The man turned his head and looked at her. His eyes were dark brown, deep-set, with heavy bags underneath them. He looked exhausted, not just from one bad night, but from many, many bad nights stacked on top of each other. "I'm fine," he said. His voice was low and even. No drama, no begging, just a simple answer. Do you live around here?" she asked, even though she knew the answer was probably no. "I get around," he said. She stood there for a second, not sure what to do. She was going to be late for work if she didn't leave now. She had exactly $4 in her purse and a mostly empty fridge at home. She told herself to keep walking. She kept walking, but for the rest of the day, folding other people's warm clothes under the flickering lights of Sunshine Clean, she thought about those eyes. That flat, tired voice. "I get around." That night, she made spaghetti for herself and Maya. Simple, just pasta and a jar of tomato sauce, with a little garlic bread made from the last few slices of a loaf that was starting to go stiff. But it smelled good, tasted good. Maya twirled her noodles and talked about something funny that happened at school, and Clara listened and smiled and felt grateful. When she was doing the dishes, she looked out the kitchen window toward the front yard. She couldn't see the oak tree from that angle, but she thought about it. She thought about him. She scraped the leftovers from the pot into a container. There wasn't a lot, maybe enough for one person. She covered it with plastic wrap and set it on the counter. Then she picked it up again. Then she put it back in the fridge. Then, at 9:30 at night, when the house was quiet and Maya was asleep, Clara Mitchell put on her jacket, picked up that container of leftover spaghetti, walked out her front door, and went to the oak tree at the edge of her yard. He was there, asleep now, curled on his side with the canvas bag tucked under his head like a pillow. She almost didn't wake him, but then she thought about how she would feel, sleeping hungry on hard ground in October, and she gently touched his shoulder. He woke up fast, not scared, just alert, like a man used to waking up quickly, ready for anything. "I brought you some dinner," she said, holding out the container. "It's just spaghetti. Nothing special." He looked at the container, then at her, then back at the container. He took it slowly. "Thank you," he said. "There's a plastic fork in there too," she said. "And a bottle of water." He nodded once. She went back inside. She didn't know why she had done it. She didn't have extra food to give away. She had just fed him a meal that could have been her lunch tomorrow. But she slept better that night than she had in months. The next morning, the empty container was sitting clean on the bottom step of her porch. He had washed it. Somehow, she stood there and stared at it for a long moment. Then she picked it up, went inside, and got ready for work. She didn't look for him the next day. She told herself it was a one-time thing. A good deed. Done. But when she was making dinner Wednesday night, rice and beans, the cheapest meal she knew how to make stretch, she automatically made a little extra. She didn't even realize she'd done it until she was spooning it into a second container. She found him in the same spot, under the oak tree. This time he was awake, sitting up, watching the street. When she came through the front gate with the container, he looked at her calmly. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said, and went back inside. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every night, a plate. Every morning, a clean container on the bottom step. He never asked for it. He never knocked on her door. He never made her feel uncomfortable or crowded. He simply existed, quietly, in his spot under the oak tree, and every night she brought him whatever she had made for herself and Maya. Maya found out on the 5th day. "Mommy, who is that man by the tree?" Clara explained simply. "He doesn't have a home right now, so we share our dinner with him." Maya pressed her face against the window glass and looked at him for a long time. "Does he have a name?" she asked. Clara realized she had never asked. That evening, when she brought out his plate, chicken and potatoes, a good night, she asked. "My name is Clara," she said. "What's yours?" He looked up at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Something careful. "Thomas," he said. "Thomas Greer." "Nice to meet you, Thomas." She went inside. Over the next few weeks, something slowly shifted. Started small. A few exchanged sentences. How are you today? Getting along. Cold night coming. Yes. I left an extra blanket on the step. That was kind. He was polite, careful with his words. He never complained, never asked for more than what she brought, never made any demands. But the more she paid attention, the more things she noticed that didn't quite add up. His hands, for one thing. They were rough and weathered, yes. But his fingers, long, thin fingers, moved in ways that made her think of someone precise. Someone who had spent years doing something that required detail and care. She couldn't explain why she thought that. She just noticed. His speech, for another. He spoke simply, but his word choices were not simple. He said things like, I appreciate your consistency, and the temperatures have been particularly unforgiving this week. That wasn't how most people talked on the street. That was the kind of language that came from reading, from education. One night she brought out 2 plates, one for him, one for herself, and sat down on the top porch step while he ate on the bottom step. They didn't talk much, but it felt comfortable, like 2 people who had somehow decided to trust each other a little bit. Do you have family? She asked, when the silence had stretched out long enough to feel safe. A long pause. Yes, he said. She waited, but he didn't add anything more. She didn't push. In the 4th week, something happened that scared her. She came home from work on a Friday evening, and the spot under the oak tree was empty. No Thomas. No canvas bag. No sign of him at all. She made dinner, set an extra plate as always, and waited. He didn't come. She ate alone. Put the extra food in the fridge. Told herself it was fine. He wasn't her responsibility. He was a man she fed sometimes. That was it. But she couldn't sleep. She got up at midnight and looked out the window. The tree was still empty. Saturday morning, still no Thomas. Saturday night, nothing. She felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Something that felt embarrassingly close to grief. Sunday afternoon, she was raking leaves in the front yard when she saw him coming up the street, slow and careful. His green coat pulled tight. He was limping slightly. Not a lot. Just enough that she noticed. Relief hit her so fast and hard it surprised her. She didn't say anything about it. She just brought his dinner out that night as usual. But when she set it down, she said quietly, I'm glad you're back. He looked at the plate for a moment, then up at her. Were you worried? He asked. His voice was neutral, but his eyes were asking something different. A little, she admitted. He nodded slowly. That was all. November came. The temperatures dropped. Clara started leaving a thermos of hot coffee on the step with his plate every night. She found an old sleeping bag in her closet from a camping trip she and Derek had taken before everything fell apart, and she left that too. Thomas accepted all of it without making a fuss, without embarrassing her with too much gratitude. He simply received it and said thank you, and left the containers clean on the step each morning like clockwork. One night, Maya insisted on bringing the plate out herself. Clara watched from the doorway, ready to step in. Maya walked down the steps very carefully, holding the plate with both hands, her tongue slightly out in concentration. She set it down in front of Thomas with enormous seriousness. I helped make the chicken, she announced. Thomas looked at her. And for the first time since Clara had known him, really the first time, he smiled. A real smile. Small and slow, but real. Then I'm sure it will be delicious, he said. Maya beamed and ran back to her mother. Clara watched Thomas pick up the fork. She watched his hands. And she noticed something new. There was a mark on his wrist, just barely visible under the cuff of his coat. A tattoo, she thought at first. But no. Too precise. Too deliberate. It looked like a scar in a particular shape. She couldn't make it out clearly in the porch light. She told herself it was none of her business. But it stayed in her mind. It was on a night in the 3rd month. A cold December Tuesday, 2 days after Clara had made her rent payment and was down to her last $40 until the following Friday, that everything began to fall apart and come together at the same time. She had made a simple dinner that night. Vegetable soup. The real bargain kind. stretched with extra water and whatever vegetables were left in the crisper drawer. It was humble food, but it was warm and she had made enough for 3. Maya was already in bed. Clara wrapped up Thomas's portion, added the last of the bread, and carried it out to the porch. He was in his usual spot, but tonight he looked different. He was sitting very straight, which was unusual. His hands were resting on his knees. His eyes were fixed on the front door, like he had been waiting, not for food, for her. A small chill moved through Clara that had nothing to do with the December air. She came down the steps and held out the container. He didn't take it right away. "Clara," he said. It was the first time he had used her name. She stopped. "Yes." He looked at her steadily. Those deep brown eyes, calm and sad and carrying something enormous. "I need to tell you something," he said. The porch light buzzed softly above them. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and went quiet. "Okay," she said slowly. He took a slow breath. His jaw shifted slightly, like he was arranging something inside himself, like a person getting ready to lift something very heavy. And then he said the 4 words. For quiet, even words, spoken clearly in the cold December night air. Clara's hands went numb first, then her arms. The container of soup slipped from her fingers. She heard it hit the porch step, heard the soft slosh of liquid, but she couldn't look down because she was shaking. She was actually shaking, her whole body, because those 4 words meant that nothing, not one single thing, about the last 3 months was what she had believed it to be. And she didn't know yet if that was the most terrifying thing she had ever heard, or the most wonderful. For words, that's all it took. For words to shatter everything Clara thought she knew. She stood on that cold December porch, her soup spreading in a slow puddle across the bottom step, her breath coming out in small white clouds in the night air, her entire body trembling like a leaf in a storm. Thomas Greer, the man she had been feeding for 3 months, the man who slept under her oak tree, the man with the worn-out coat and the duct-taped shoes and the careful, quiet way of speaking, had just looked her straight in the eyes and said, "I am your father." The world did not end. The street did not crack open. The sky did not fall. Everything just stayed exactly where it was. The porch light buzzing. The dog down the street settling back into silence. The cold air pressing against her face. And yet Clara felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff she hadn't known was there, looking down into a drop that had no visible bottom. "What?" she whispered. It was not a real question. She had heard him perfectly, every single word. Thomas didn't repeat himself. He just sat there, steady and still the way he always sat. But his eyes, those tired, deep brown eyes, were wet now. Just barely. Just enough that the porch light caught it. "That's not possible," Clara said. Her voice didn't sound like her own voice. It sounded far away and thin, like a voice coming through a bad phone connection. "My father is dead. My mother told me my father died before I was born. She told me that my whole life." Thomas closed his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them, he said very quietly, "Your mother was wrong, or she believed something that wasn't true. I don't know which one." Clara took a step back. Her heel hit the broken piece of the container and she almost slipped. She grabbed the porch railing and held on tight. "I need you to stop talking," she said. "I know," he said. "I need you to stop talking right now. I understand. Because what you just said it's insane. You understand that? You're a stranger. You're a man who has been sleeping under my tree for 3 months. You don't get to just sit there and say something like that and expect me to. Her voice broke. She pressed her hand over her mouth and squeezed her eyes shut. And in the silence, she heard Maya's voice in her memory from weeks ago. "Does he have a name?" And she heard her own voice answering, "I never asked." She opened her eyes. "Go inside," she said to Thomas. Not a kind invitation. A flat, scared command. He looked at her carefully. "Go inside where?" he asked. She stared at him. Then she stepped to the side and pulled open the screen door. "In here," she said. "Right now. Before I change my mind." Thomas Greer had never been inside the yellow house on Bender Street. He moved slowly as he came up the steps, the way old men move when their knees have seen too many hard winters. He was taller than Clara had realized, now that he was standing fully upright and walking through a doorway. 6 feet, maybe just over. With the coat off, she asked him to hang it by the door. He was thinner than she'd thought too. His shoulders were wide, the kind of wide that said he had once been strong. But his arms under his flannel shirt were lean now, worn down. He sat at her kitchen table without being asked to, like he knew which chair was the one that wouldn't creak. Clara stood at the counter with her arms crossed over her chest. She didn't offer coffee. She didn't offer anything. She just looked at him. "Start talking," she said. "And I want everything, not the short version." Thomas folded his hands on the table. "Your mother's name was Diane," he said. "Diane Lorraine Webb before she became Diane Mitchell. She was 22 years old when we met. I was 27. We were in love, genuinely deeply in love, for about 2 years. And then something happened, and everything went wrong. And she left. And she took you with her, even though you weren't born yet." Clara's throat tightened. Her mother's name had been Diane. Diane had died 4 years ago, quietly, in a hospital bed, holding Clara's hand. "What happened?" Clara asked. Her voice was steadier now. She was forcing herself to be steady, to listen, to think. Thomas took a slow breath. "I made a mistake," he said. "A bad one. I won't dress it up to make myself sound better. I had a problem with gambling. Not cards or horses, the kind of gambling that gets mixed up with men you should never be mixed up with. I owed money to people who didn't accept excuses. One night they came to collect, and things happened that I'm not proud of. Nobody got hurt physically, but your mother saw who I really was that night, or who I had become, and she was pregnant with you, and she made a decision to protect you from that life. From me." Clara stared at him. "She told me you were dead," she said flatly. Something moved across Thomas's face, deep and painful and old. "I know," he said. "I found out years later, through a cousin of hers who took pity on me, that she had told you that. By then, she had moved 3 times. I had no legal right to you. I had made no effort in the early years because I was too far gone in my own destruction to know I should. And then when I finally got clean, really clean for good, you were 11 years old, living in another city with a mother who had built a whole world without me in it. And I made the coward's choice. I told myself you were better off not knowing. Then why now?" Clara's voice cracked on the second word. She pressed her lips together. "Why show up now like this? Why not knock on my door? Why not write a letter? Why not? Why were you sleeping under a tree, Thomas? If you have some big explanation, why were you living outside?" He met her eyes. "Because I got sick," he said simply. "About a year ago. My kidneys. I spent what savings I had on treatment. Sold my apartment contents piece by piece. My car. By the time I found out where you were, I'd been looking for 8 months with a private investigator I paid in installments. I had almost nothing left. I found this street. I found this house. I found you." He paused. "And then I couldn't make myself knock on the door," he said. "Why not?" "Because you brought out a plate of food and set it at my feet before I even decided what to do." His voice went very quiet. "And I thought I would watch for a little while. See who you were. See what kind of person you'd become without me." The kitchen was very, very still. A clock on the wall ticked. "And," Clara said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Thomas looked at her. Really looked at her, in a way that was so open and raw that she had to fight the urge to look away. "You gave food to a dirty old stranger out of your last pot of dinner," he said. "Every single night for 3 months. You gave him a blanket and coffee and bread and kindness, and you never asked for anything back, and you never made him feel like less than a human being." His voice broke on the last few words. He pressed his lips together and held himself together with visible effort. "You are extraordinary," he said. "You became extraordinary without any help from me, and I have no right to any of it. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. I couldn't take another plate of food from your hands and keep lying to you by saying nothing." Clara didn't cry. She wanted to. She could feel it building behind her eyes like water behind a dam. But she didn't let it break. Not yet. Instead, she pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "I want to ask you some questions," she said. "And I want you to answer every single one honestly. Can you do that?" "Yes," he said. "Do you have any proof? Anything that proves what you're saying is true?" Thomas reached into the breast pocket of his flannel shirt, a slow, deliberate movement, and placed 3 things on the kitchen table. The first was a photograph. Old and slightly faded, the edges soft with age. Clara picked it up. It showed a young man, 20-something, lean, with a wide smile, standing next to a young woman with a round, happy face. The woman had her hand on her barely visible belly bump. She was laughing at something just outside the frame. The young woman was Clara's mother. Clara's hand started shaking again. She set the photo down and looked at the second item. It was a birth certificate. Clara's birth certificate. With her full name, Clara Ann Mitchell, and her date of birth, and her mother's name, and in the space for father, Thomas Eugene Greer. Clara had never seen this document before. Her mother had given her a different copy her whole life. A copy with a line through the father's name. Unreadable. Redacted. This copy was clean and full and real. The third item was a folded piece of paper. A letter, in a woman's handwriting that Clara recognized immediately, the way you always recognize the handwriting of someone you loved and lost. Her mother's handwriting. She looked up at Thomas. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "Your mother sent it to me," he said. 6 months before she died. I don't know how she found my address, but she did. He stopped, cleared his throat. She apologized. She said she had made a decision she believed was right at the time, and that she still believed it was right given who I was back then, but that she thought you deserved to know the truth eventually. She asked me to find you. When I was ready. Clara unfolded the letter slowly. She recognized the handwriting. The way her mother made her D's with a little extra loop. The way she crossed her T's with a slight upward angle. She read it once. Then she read it again. Then she folded it carefully, put it flat on the table, and pressed both hands on top of it like she was keeping it from flying away. And finally, the dam broke. She cried in a way she hadn't cried since her mother's funeral. Deep, ragged, shaking sobs that came from somewhere far down inside her where she kept all the things she was too tired to feel during the day. She cried for her mother. She cried for the father-shaped hole she had carried her whole life without even fully knowing it was there. She cried for Derek. She cried for $40 grocery runs and cracker dinners, and every night she had sat at this table alone with the bills. Thomas sat across from her and did not touch her and did not speak. He let her cry. He seemed to understand that she needed to do it alone. When it was over, when the sobbing slowed and she was just breathing hard, her hands still pressed on her mother's letter, she looked up at him. His eyes were red. He hadn't been as quiet as he'd seemed. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this," Clara said. Her voice was raw and honest. "Nothing," he said. "Not right now. You don't have to do anything right now." "Are you dying?" she asked directly. He blinked, then a sad, small smile. "The kidneys are manageable now with the right treatment. I'm not dying. Not immediately." "Then you're not sleeping under that tree another night," she said. He shook his head. "Clara, I have a couch," she said. "It's not fancy. The left armrest has a tear in it from when Maya was going through her scissors phase. But it's warm and it's inside, and if you think I'm going to feed a man for 3 months and then find out he's my father and let him sleep on frozen ground, you clearly don't know me very well yet." Thomas looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said softly. "I suppose I don't." "But you're going to," she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't quite forgiveness, not yet, not fully. Forgiveness was a long road, and they were only at the very beginning of it. Clara knew that. She wasn't naive. There were going to be hard conversations ahead. There were going to be nights when the anger came back. There were going to be moments of doubt and grief and confusion. But she also knew this. Her mother had kept a secret to protect her. Thomas had kept a secret out of shame. And somewhere underneath all those secrets, there had been real love. Broken, damaged, imperfect love, but real. And Clara Ann Mitchell had spent her whole life taking broken, damaged, imperfect things and finding a way to make them work. The next morning, Maya came downstairs in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes, and found a strange old man asleep on the couch under the blue blanket that normally lived in the closet. She stopped, stared. Then she looked at her mother, who was standing at the stove making oatmeal, watching Maya over her shoulder. "Mommy," Maya said in a careful whisper, "the tree man is on our couch." "I know, baby," Clara said. "Why?" Clara turned down the burner and came to kneel in front of her daughter, putting both hands gently on Maya's small shoulders. "You know how you asked me once if he had a name?" Maya nodded. "His name is Thomas," Clara said. "And it turns out he's family. He's my dad, which means he's your grandfather." Maya's eyes went very wide. She looked at the sleeping man on the couch, then back at her mother. "We have a grandpa now?" she said. Clara felt the tears threaten again. She blinked them back. "Yeah," she said. "We do." Maya was quiet for a moment, thinking this over with the intense seriousness that only 8-year-olds can bring to a new piece of information. Then she walked to the couch very quietly and stood next to it, looking down at Thomas Greer's sleeping face. After a moment, she reached out and very gently patted him twice on the shoulder. Thomas stirred. His eyes opened slowly. He saw the ceiling first. Then he turned his head and saw Maya standing there, looking at him with her mother's eyes, dark and serious and warm. "Good morning," Maya said, very politely, like she was greeting someone at the front door. Thomas blinked. Something in his face went very still, the way a person goes still when something they stopped believing in suddenly turns out to be real. "Good morning," he said. "Mommy makes good oatmeal," Maya announced. "You should have some." Thomas looked over at Clara, who was standing in the kitchen doorway watching them with her arms folded and her eyes wet and a small, careful smile on her face. He looked back at Maya. "I think I will," he said. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life doesn't work that way. In the weeks that followed, there were difficult conversations. There were moments when Clara felt the anger rise up hot and sudden, when she'd be washing dishes or driving Maya to school and it would hit her out of nowhere. "He was right there under that tree watching while I was stretching $40 across a whole week." And she'd have to sit with that anger and breathe through it. Thomas never made excuses when she brought those feelings to him. He just listened. He said he was sorry. And then he listened some more. He got a room, a real room, in a boarding house 2 streets over once Clara helped him connect with some support services for veterans. Because that's something else she learned. Thomas Greer had served 22 years. The mark on his wrist she had noticed by porch light wasn't a scar. It was a small, faded military tattoo. One of the first things the VA helped sort out was getting him the benefits he was entitled to and hadn't been collecting for years because he'd lost track of the paperwork in his years of unraveling. He started attending Maya's school events, sitting in the back, quietly, not wanting to push in too fast. Maya had no such hesitation. She dragged him to the front row at her winter concert and made him hold her tambourine while she got her coat. And Clara watched from 2 seats over and felt something in her chest that she hadn't felt in a very long time. Something that felt like wholeness. Not the kind of wholeness that meant everything was fixed. Not the kind that pretended the hard years hadn't happened. But the kind that comes when a missing piece, even a complicated, painful, long-lost piece, finally finds its way back to where it belongs. One evening, a few months after that December night on the porch, Clara was sitting at the kitchen table. The bills were there, same as always. The math was still tight, same as always. But Thomas was in the living room reading to Maya, his deep voice carrying through the wall in the warm, even way of someone who had been doing it their whole life and was just now getting the chance again. Clara looked at the bills. And then she looked at the wall behind which her father's voice was reading her daughter a story. She picked up her pen. She wrote the first check. And this time she didn't feel alone doing it. The oak tree on Bender Street still stands. Every now and then, on Sunday mornings, if you happen to walk past the little yellow house, you might see 3 people sitting on the front porch. An old man in a decent coat. A new one without duct tape. A woman with tired eyes and a warm smile. And a little girl who talks enough for all three of them combined. They eat breakfast outside when the weather lets them. Because some habits, once started, are too good to stop. If this story moved you, touched your heart, or made you think about the people in your life you might be overlooking, please subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Hit that notification bell and share this with someone who needs to hear a story like this today. Your support means everything to us. See you in the next one.